everyone, I'm Max from AFM.aero. Welcome to the Pilot Training Connect podcast, where we interview leaders from the pilot training industry to learn more about their organization and their views of the industry. Every week, we invite an industry leader to sit down with us to share their knowledge and views. And this week, I have the great pleasure to be joined by Nik Kresse, Vice President of Airplane Operations of Hillsboro Aero Academy. Hillsboro Aero Academy is a well-known US-based flight school which just recently signed a training partnership with Alaska Air Group for an Ascent Pilot Academy and a Cadet Pilot Program partnership with Vietnam's largest low-cost carrier, VietJet. Welcome to the Pilot Training Connect podcast, Nik.
Thanks for having me, Max.
Nik, I have seen Hillsboro constantly in the market research that we do over the past 6 months. It seems to be that you're going from growth to growth. You're announcing new partnerships. You are not only in the US, but also in Southeast Asia. So I think there will be a lot of people who are really interested in your kind of activities. So can you just give a brief introduction to Hillsboro Aero Academy and then also maybe a bit about yourself and your background?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so Hillsboro Aero Academy, we're a flight school. We do both fixed wing and rotor wing operations, and we've been in business for over 42 years, so quite a long history. We focus mostly on international training. However, we have a new partnership with Alaska Air Group, and so we also are quite active in the domestic market in the US as well. So we've been working on new pilot development programs and a lot of B2B stuff recently, and we're really excited for the future of aviation going forward.
Can you give us a brief idea about kind of the size of the operation of Hillsboro Aero Academy? Like how many aircraft do you have? How many students do you train? Just so people get kind of an idea of your operations.
Sure. Yeah. So we have over 90 fixed wing aircraft, and we train, between, depending on incoming and outgoing students, we train somewhere between 400 and 600 students at a time.
Oh, that's really fantastic. And are you located in one location in the US? Do you have multiple bases? What is your geographical footprint?
Yeah. So we have 2 fixed wing bases and 1 rotor wing base. Our headquarters is in Hillsboro, Oregon, and that's where we do fixed wing only. And then we also have another fixed wing location in Redmond, Oregon, which is about 3 hours southeast of Portland, and that's on the other side of the Cascade Mountains, so it's a totally different flight environment. We have over 300 days of sunny weather there in Redmond, so we do a lot of our accelerated training there in Redmond. And then we also have our rotor wing school in Troutdale, Oregon, which is just on the other side of Portland. So it's kind of on the east side of Portland at the base of the Columbia Gorge in Oregon.
Okay, that's fantastic. That's also, so I know of Hillsboro Aero Academy since I think it was around 2017 or so, and I know that the brand is quite well known around the world. Can you just share maybe some references that Hillsboro Aero Academy has trained in the past in terms of maybe different geographical markets, in terms of different institutional partnerships, be it with airlines or be it with colleges?
Absolutely, yeah. So we had been big in training pilots from China, multiple airlines from China, such as China Eastern, Air China, Shandong Airlines, Junyao Airlines, etc. So we had done a lot of training of pilots from China in the past. More recently, now we do more training with pilots from Korea, South Korea, and we have partnership with Korean Aeronautical University, KAU, which is a university which feeds cadets into the Korean Air system. So we've been doing a lot of training like that. We also have students from I think in our history, I think our list is maybe 75 countries worldwide, individual students. So definitely not shy to have cadets from anywhere across the world and train them depending on what their training needs are.
Yeah. I can absolutely see that because, and I can confirm that because I'm located here in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, and I almost see on a weekly basis Hillsboro Aero Academy as like part of a few Google ads that I see. So I've known that historically Hillsboro has been really well known on the international scene. Can you just maybe share of how when the pandemic hit, there must have been a bit of a change in strategy at Hillsborough, with travel restrictions in place and all that. How did you manage to deal with that?
Yeah, when the pandemic hit, we started having a lot of trouble at being an international flight school with, getting students in on visas, or maybe students wanted to delay their training to kind of see how COVID and the industry was going to respond to it. And so for us, yeah, we did see a little bit of a decline of students as time wore on in the pandemic. And so the way that we decided to respond there was to try to strengthen the systems that we had in place so that when inevitably the pandemic sort of starts to loosen up a little bit, regulations loosen up, and people are more comfortable, that we're ready to handle the large amount of students that we think are coming our way and have been coming our way for the last year or so. So we spent a lot of time and energy, for example, on our IT infrastructure. So being a larger flight school, training as many students as I mentioned before, 400 plus students at any given time, you really have to know how the students are doing in their training and what you can do to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks and that the customers are happy. So we spent a lot of time working with the software, our flight management software, and pulling all the data from that, putting it on our own database, and then creating these really flexible and really great management tools and dashboards that our managers can use, which we're currently using to a large extent now, with all the students that we've been getting recently. And I think it's one of those things where I think it'll help us be really strong in the future as well as we increase our student numbers.
Yeah.
And so I think that was a phenomenal decision that our CEO made to invest in that type of infrastructure to make us solid for the future.
Okay. I know as well that Hillsborough has a number of college partnerships in the US. Can you just share some of the ones which have partnerships with you?
Sure. We have a partnership with Liberty, Purdue University, Multnomah, which is a local college in Portland, and Portland Community College. So we have a couple different college partnerships, and so I think that sets us up really well for any potential pilots who also want to get a 2-year or 4-year degree along with their flight training. Then we can definitely help them out and work with them through any one of those colleges.
Fantastic. And I know one of the very unique features about Hillsborough, as in terms of being a US flight school with an international market focus, is that you issue F1 visas. Can you just share kind of what it means to be able to issue an F1 visa and what the advantages of such a visa are for international aspiring pilots who go and do their training with you?
Yeah, I think the F1 visa is a really, really important thing for us and for the pilots that train at HAA. So what the F1 visa allows is it allows the students, once you finish the CFI or maybe the CFII, MEI, then it allows some working experience for the students. So they don't have to go home once they finish the course. They can stay here and they can work for us. They can work for another company for up to 23.5 months. So that's really useful because then you can come to HAA, get your licenses, and then build your time up to whatever your authorities minimums are. So that might be 1,000 hours or 1,500 hours. So I think that's a huge benefit for the students that come here, is it allows that longer amount of time of working experience that they're eligible for.
Oh, that is really fantastic to hear. And I know there's only very few flight schools or let's just say flight training organizations, because some are colleges as well. So flight training organizations who have this ability in the US. Can you just share, especially what I mentioned right at the beginning, some of the recent announcements? So now that we've kind of emerged as an industry out of the pandemic, can you just share some of the key growth initiatives that you have announced over the past 6 months?
Yeah, absolutely. So, our biggest initiative, our biggest partnership that we've recently signed is with Alaska Air Groups, as you mentioned before. And that's a really unique cadet program in my eyes, as we're the only flight academy so far that's working with them for training their pilots, and I think they've done a really good job sort of identifying some of the barriers in the industry for people to become pilots and realize the dream of becoming a pilot. They've done a really good job working with banks to secure funding, low interest rates, but they're also offering over $26,000 in a stipend to pay for the commercial training as well. And so I think airlines in the future, I think Alaska kind of being one of the first to kind of look at those financing options, secure financing options, and then also providing that stipend. I think those are the big things that I think are going to continue to happen in the industry as time wears on, especially next year in 2023.
And what I saw this announcement, it was phenomenal and quite fantastic. Congratulations to you on that. How much do you think that will expand Hillsborough from its kind of current infrastructure, current capacity, current operations, knowing that Alaska Air Group is, one of the largest players in the US?
Yeah, right now we have plans to train between 200 and 250 students for Alaska Air Group per year. And we do have the current capacity to be able to do that. And we're always looking for the right kinds of partners to be working with. Yeah, so we should be able to handle that number of students without further expansion of the school. However, I think that there are so many other airlines and businesses and individual students who would love to become pilots or would love us to train pilots. So I think potentially in the future we will have to look at expansion depending on what happens in the future.
Okay. And I know the second huge announcement, which I think also surprised a lot of people in the industry, was really this announcement from, I think it was around a week ago or so, where you were announced by VietJet, which is the largest low-cost carrier in Vietnam, which has over 300 aircraft on order yet to be delivered, I think around something like 350, that you are one of their cadet pilot program training partners. Can you just kind of share, with everyone who's listening, kind of what that program is about? And I know previously, if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong here, you were already a Vietnamese approved flight school. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So we were already approved by the CAAV. And yes, we're really excited to be working with VietJet in the future. Obviously, Vietnam is seeing some big growth in aviation, and so we're really excited to see where this goes with VietJet and hopefully to be training some of their cadets here shortly in the future. So that's really exciting for us.
That is really fantastic. And just a follow-up question, because I know until now, these are really two big let's call them B2B or like, airline program announcements that Hillsborough has made in the last 6 months. Would you say that Hillsborough has somewhat shifted from kind of the B2C target focus, which the majority of the industry had throughout the pandemic, to now, where the large B2B airline kind of programs are coming back to the flight school?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we're still very focused on B2C, and we really want to make sure that we're a adaptable and a diverse company. I think the diversity of the different type of business that we have really helped us through the pandemic as well, to where we weren't oversaturated in any one market, and so we were kind of able to make it through the pandemic that way. So I don't think we're necessarily shifting focus to B2B, because we really want to be a strong training option for individual students as well. But I will say that we have seen a lot more interest in the B2B space recently, and that's also something that I think we do very, very well. We have a lot of experience in training thousands of cadets B2B, especially those cadets from China and South Korea and Japan and other places around the world. So, I think that's just due to the amount of interest that's currently going on in the industry.
Oh, fantastic. Really fantastic. And you alluded to something earlier, which was around, Alaska Air kind of Alaska Air Group potentially setting a new trend in the industry, specifically in regards to the financing of pilot training programs, because I think as we all know, the cost to deliver flight training has gone up really dramatically this year. What would you say are the key trends that you're seeing from like the Hillsborough perspective that are happening within the flight training industry?
Yeah, I think that the airlines are trying to look for creative ways to expand the pilot pool. And so I think a lot of different strategies are being looked at right now. So, one of the things that the airlines are, from my perspective, that some of the airlines are now looking at is dropping the 4-year degree requirement and taking more of like a human resources, interview style approach to make sure that they're filtering and finding the right kind of cadets to go into their training system. And the other thing is, because I think that to get into aviation and to want to fly for an airline like Alaska or American or United, something like that, it's always been very difficult, because those main lines would require a 4-year degree, but also the flight training as well, and that's very, very expensive. And if you don't have loans, then there's very few people that would be able to afford a 4-year degree and flight training, let alone the deferred wages and the wages that you would be getting kind of first year, getting into the industry as a commercial pilot. So I think that those are all the things that are being looked at right now. I see that the regionals are all increasing their first year first officer wages, as well as their captain wages, and so there's a lot of talk about the things that are happening currently as we speak right now, to make it a little bit more attractive, not require the 4-year degree, but also have increased wages when you go into the airline to hopefully sort of offset some of those loan repayments and things like that. So I think it's a huge advancement in the industry, what we're seeing going on right now, and I think it'll have to continue into the future to make sure that we can grow that pool of pilots that airlines can pull from.
I couldn't agree more with you, right? Like the pilot profession, or the attractiveness of the pilot profession, suffered so greatly in the pandemic, right? Because there's all this uncertainty, and young people then were like, okay, but what if I start my pilot training now? It's so expensive. What if there's another wave? Will I lose my job? And then on top of that, flight training has become more expensive. So I feel airlines, or some airlines, are really leading the way in addressing both these things, as you said, making the pilot profession more attractive by higher compensation, and then two, supporting the funding mechanism. I have a slightly similar question, but it's also a bit of a unique question. Did you see an increase in interest in terms of people wanting to become a pilot when the latest Top Gun movie was released?
That's a really interesting question. You know, I will say that we have seen an increase in interest from domestic pilots for sure recently, and so you know, there's a couple different theories that we have on why that might be. I never thought of it in that way. Maybe the new Top Gun movie is getting people excited about aviation. So you might be onto something there. That could be the case. I just saw it myself recently. I think a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was pretty good. So.
Oh yeah, same with me. So I didn't see it for like 2 or 3 months, and I just saw it last week. I was also blown away. And the reason why I ask is because we learned from our network that there have been flight schools, one flight school in particular in Europe, which even used it and ran ads in the cinema before the movie screening. And so we have learned from a number of flight schools that in the 2 months following the release of such a movie, there was an increase in interest. India has just had the same. They had a Bollywood movie come out similar to Top Gun, which has also increased the interest in pilot training. So maybe also the industry can do more to encourage, blockbuster movies to really, strengthen the attractiveness of the pilot profession.
Yeah, I agree. I think it can only help. Anything out there that can help inspire people to become pilots, I think is great, because it's such a cool industry. The flight industry, and I love to see people get started in their careers.
Fantastic. Let's switch gears slightly, and let's talk about like some of the challenges. Because I fully agree with you in terms of the trends that we're seeing. The industry is working on making it more attractive. There's a lot of media attention right now about pilots being in demand, which is causing a lot of interest again, and funding solutions are being looked into. What about on the challenges side? Like, what are you seeing at Hillsborough from an industry standpoint, and also from a operational standpoint, where you see potential obstacles in terms of being able to meet the demand that the industry will have over the next few years?
Yeah, I think we're in a really interesting situation in the industry right now where, we also have inflation going on, and that's inflation in the US and worldwide. So that's having a big effect on things like, parts, and obviously a big component of that inflation number is fuel as well. The fuel prices have been extremely variable recently, and those are some of the things that we have to always be thinking about, and how are we gonna maneuver in this climate. The other thing that we're seeing is, I think there's not only in the US a big pilot shortage, but here in the US we also have a mechanic shortage as well. So there's just so many different jobs. If you're a mechanic right now, you can work for a flight school, you can work for an airline, you can, even if you have an A&P, I've even heard of other industries hiring A&Ps, and there's some very good careers and high paying jobs for mechanics in other industries as well, not just aviation. So, I think that's one of the things that is challenging for the industry. How are we going to make sure that we are training enough mechanics as well to make sure that we can support the airplane fleets that are necessary to keep the industry going?
That is an excellent point, which I've heard of in the past, but no one has really been as vocal about how a potential shortage of aircraft mechanics could impact flight school operations? Because especially someone the size of, your operation that you have, I'm sure you have a huge demand for A&P mechanics. Is Hillsborough currently in the training space for aircraft maintenance technicians?
So we do have an apprentice program. So we do have a number of apprentices that are training and getting the hours that they need. So we do run that because we want to have our own sort of pipeline, you could say, mechanic pipeline to eventually hire them as A&Ps. And we also sponsor their A&P tests and things like that. So yeah, so that's something that we're doing to try to keep up with it as well. But it's an ongoing, issue in the industry, I think, the mechanic shortage.
Okay. And what are your thoughts on, one of the big topics out there is currently electrification of transportation. And, a couple of months ago, Textron bought Pipistrel, the European manufacturer of training aircraft, which are also now being integrated and used in more and more flight schools. What is your view on, the introduction or integration of electric training aircraft in the flight training industry?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting space. I think that there's a lot of potential in the future for this to really catch on, for sure. It's not necessarily something that we're currently looking at as far as HAA, but it's something that we definitely have a close eye on because to be able to fly an airplane that's electric, I think it comes with its a huge set of advantages and probably a set of challenges as well. I think it's really interesting, and I think it would be really great to see that progress, and I'm sure it's going to progress a lot as time goes on. There's so many technological advancements that are happening in the industry that are exciting, such as VR and AR simulators and all kinds of things that are going on. So we're keeping a close eye on it, and I hope it can catch on and be a successful thing for sure.
Fantastic. Let me end this really great interview by asking you, if you were to look at the crystal ball, looking into the future and speculating a bit, how do you see the flight training industry and the pilot demand develop over the next 2 years?
Yeah, I think that the pilot demand over the next 2 years, yeah, I think it's going to be huge. Like you said, through the pandemic, we're currently in a very unique situation where we had a lot of early retirements in the airlines. We're trying to backfill all of that. So in the next 2 years, I really agree with the sentiment that a lot of airlines are going to be looking to create their own pilot development programs. They're going to be looking to secure finances for those programs, and they're going to be looking for really strong flight training providers to work with that can do a really good job training their cadets, training safe cadets, but also efficiently as well. So, I'm really excited to see what happens in the industry in the next 2 years. We haven't seen this kind of pilot development program historically in the past because there just hasn't been this kind of pilot shortage. When I was getting my flight training, we didn't have a pilot shortage. It was the opposite. There's a lot of pilots, and you had to build your pilot resume in order to go to the airline. So things are shifting drastically, and I think that the pandemic has had a big effect on that as well. So I'm really excited to see the different types of solutions that flight training providers and airlines put together in the next 2 years, because I think long term that's going to set the industry up really, really well for the future to make sure that we can provide the number of pilots that need to be in the pool for the industry to be successful.
So do you think, I completely agree with you, and it's something that we've been saying now since the beginning of 2021, that we actually predict that in 2023 and 2024, we're going to see record number of pathway/cadet, airline programs. Do you think the flight training industry itself will be able to meet that demand? And I think you made a really good point already, which is that, you know, large established airlines will be looking specifically to partner with schools which have the ability to scale, which have the experience to also incorporate, you know, financing programs. So it sounds to me like you and I were of a similar view that we predict that the medium and large size flight training organizations over the next 2 years are just going to get much, much bigger.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment for sure. You know, in the US, there are, you know, very few, or sort of a small contingent or a small handful of schools that are, you know, medium to large size. In the US, most of the flight schools are smaller operations, right? And that's sort of how the industry works with pilot training. So I think that as these opportunities come up, that airlines are going to start looking towards those medium and large size flight schools, like you mentioned, and I think that those schools, the ones that, exactly like you said, the ones that have maybe the financial backing or the means or the infrastructure in place to be able to expand, are going to be the ones who are going to be probably providing the flight training for the airlines and the B2B space in the future, for sure.
It's really amazing to speak with someone such as yourself, who is so excited and optimistic about the future. I remember when we did these interviews around 1.5 years ago. You know, there was a lot of uncertainty. There was a lot of mostly uncertainty, right? So people didn't know where this industry, you know, what lay ahead. But it sounds like, I'm very thankful for you taking the time today and to share with everyone your excitement and your optimism for the future.
Yeah, my pleasure, Max. No problem. Anytime.
Okay. Just so for anyone listening, if anyone wants to learn more about Hillsboro Aero Academy, please check out their website, flyhaa.com, or connect with Nik on LinkedIn. Nik, you're on LinkedIn, right?
Yep, I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free, if anybody has questions, feel free to send me a message.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Nik. I hope you have a fantastic day.
Thank you so much, Max. You too.